Hi everybody, I'm Pete. I teach primarily chemistry here in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. So my unit plan is actually on the chemistry of dyes, and essentially what it entails is using some colorimeters as well as some things that I've done in the past kind of as isolated lessons and trying to put them together with an international focus. So really the driving question of my unit is simply how are dyes used throughout the world, and what are some of the pros and cons of dyes, both artificial and synthetic. So some of the essentially where my motivation for this unit came from this summer in Mexico. I spent a month in Oaxaca doing some Spanish language study, and during that time I went on basically a kind of a side trip for the day where I went through a nonprofit called Envia, and Envia is a microfinance organization, very small, and what it does is instead of going on tours to a lot of the villages surrounding Oaxaca where the indigenous women often make arts and crafts or have small businesses, one of those small businesses is weaving. And the weavings are, which they call tejates, are essentially made of different color wools. And those different color wools are made from a lot of the synthetic dyes at times, but the women in a lot of the villages actually use natural dyes like indigo and several others. So what was interesting is on the tour, all the money that you pay to go on the tour actually goes back to the women as microfinance loans. So the tour is essentially you would go and the women would give their business plan pitches, and so you had a chance to know that your money was actually going right back to the women. So it was made for a really, really interesting experience, and you got invited into these women's homes. So I actually took some video analysis of that, or videotape of that, and kind of thought, well, how could I use this? And so really that, coming with getting into IREX, just really kind of put together some ideas for me. One of the things the women showed me in the unit, or when they are actually dyeing it, is that they would change the color of a lot of these natural dyes by adding either bicarbonate or lemon juice. So essentially changing the pH would change the shade, and they, through years of experience had mastered changing the pH to get the color they wanted. Now they didn't know anything about pH necessarily, but anybody who studies a little chemistry know that, wow, what a great introduction to an acid-base unit. So I kind of thought a little bit more deeply about that, and just kind of the role of dyes kind of in culture. When you talk about, like, for example, some of the dyes they use in synthetic dyes that are used in products made in China, and some of the negative health outcomes in the United States. So I figured, wow, there's a lot really to this dye unit. So my unit's essentially putting those together into a series of lessons, and where kids are going to learn more about the structure of those dyes as well as the solubility. So for example, some of the learning activities involved in this will be a challenge to analyze red 40 dye that has some negative publicity about it, have kids research it, and then there's a lab activity where I give kids essentially a packet of Kool-Aid, red Kool-Aid, and using colorimeters and some spectroscopy equipment that I've got through grants, they can actually figure out the milligrams of red 40 dye that are used in small packages of, like, the flavored beverages. In terms of cultural, what I'm going to do to lead off the unit would be to share the video that I had of the women, and I actually have a connection, so we're going to try to set up an actual Skype link so that the women that I saw who were changing the pH of the dye will actually do it for the students as well, live, or if not completely live, at least one of the classes could do it live, and we can tape that interaction so that other classes could watch it. So my goal on how to get kids globally involved and to have a social justice aspect to this is to actually do a tie-dye project as kind of one of the culminating events of this, where kids will learn about the chemistry of tie-dye, and then in the process we will be tie-dyeing some bandanas that'll be sold at a school basketball game, so kind of as a school spirit thing. But then everybody will be involved in the project in some way, whether it's tie-dyeing or actually selling them or doing some promotion for the tie-dye activity. And that way any money we raise would actually go back into microfinancing for these women. So in that aspect, I'm trying to really look at some of the standards from the Oxfam guide for standards for global citizenship and focus a lot on the social justice aspect of it. So essentially that's kind of the beginning of the unit that I'm developing. I'm still working on a couple of the learning activities, but very, very excited. And I've done some of this stuff in the past, but never had a chance to kind of bring it all together and actually bring home the international component to my students more directly. It's always been kind of indirect the way I've done it, and so I'm excited because IREX has given me the motivation to really put this together in a way that's beneficial to all my students. So I really would look forward to watching everybody else's blogs or bloggies or podcasts or vodcasts, I guess, to learn more about what you guys are planning. Thanks.